Project Apocrypha, The Death Knight, a LitRPG by J.M. Foley, a.k.a. Arty. Chapter 4, Bored to Death. Ella blew out the last of the candles, careful not to smudge the ritual chalk, then glanced at me with a look that was part embarrassment, part something softer. "You coming?" I nodded and followed her out of the room. Downstairs, the warmth of the hearth met us before we could reach the bottom step. The scent of roasted nuts and firewood clung to the air, and someone, Cass, by the sound of it, was already deep into a bottle of something strong. By the time we reached the living room, Fred was already 3 drinks in, cheeks flushed with warmth. Cass sat across from him at a low table, nursing a half-filled mug. Between them sat what looked like an old, handmade board game. A single candle flickered nearby, casting soft light over the worn surface and a scattering of carved wooden pieces. Goats, wolves, and what might have been goblins if you squinted hard enough. Fred looked up with a grunt. "Well, there you two are. Thought you'd gotten lost in the bookshelf." Cass didn't even look up from pouring another drink. More like Ella lost her dignity. "Cassian," Fred warned, red-faced and already nursing his 3rd mug. "Leave the girl alone." "I said nothing," Cass said, all innocence and mischief. "Just that they look cute together, which is objectively true. Ella, sweetheart, you could do a lot worse." He winked. "Tall, mysterious, stat-challenged. What's not to like?" Ella made a strangled sound and beelined for the couch, muttering something about needing a drink. I followed, trying not to look as flustered as I felt. It didn't work. I took the spot next to Fred, giving Ella a little breathing room, not because I wanted distance, but because she looked like she might melt through the floor if I got too close. Honestly, I was on the precipice myself. Fred chuckled, tossing in a carved goblin token into a wooden bowl. "Stat challenged, though. You get a good look at his numbers, girl." Ella hesitated, then nodded. "He's strong, smart, enduring." "But," Cass said with a smirk. "Piety of 2, Ella said softly. Cass leaned back and let out a bark of laughter. "Piety of 2? You pray with both middle fingers up, don't you?" Fred snorted into his ale. I raised my mug in mock solemnity. In my defense, the gods haven't been exactly chatty. "Well," Cass said, raising his own in return, "cheers to blasphemy." We clinked. Ella hesitated, then turned to the rest of the table. "But there was something else, a talent, one I've never seen before. I ran a ritual, used the source and everything. It came up as Anchored Soul. No description, just question marks." That sobered them a bit. Fred leaned back, rubbing his chin. "That doesn't sound like any martial talent I've heard of, not even in the war logs." Cass frowned slightly. "You sure it wasn't just dormant? Unawakened perks don't usually show up." "It was active," Ella said. "Bound to him. The source didn't recognize it." "Could be old magic," Fred muttered, "from before the archive was kept." "Or something new," Cass added, with a gleam in his eye. "Something written just for him." I shifted in my seat. Cass grinned. "Oh, don't mind us, love. We're just debating whether you're cursed, chosen, or both." Ella reached for the goat-shaped game piece and nudged it forward, trying to redirect the conversation. "It's late. Let's play some goblins and goats?" Fred grunted in approval. "Good idea. Winner gets first bath." "Loser has to clean up Clover's stall," Cass added. "And Arty has to learn the rules," I said, already dreading it. Cass smiled wickedly. "Oh, don't worry. It's like chess, if chess was designed by a drunken shepherd with a vendetta against goblins." Ella glanced sideways at me. "He's not joking." Fred began gathering the scattered pieces. "All right, let's reset. Full rules or house variant." Cass was already stacking the goblin tokens into neat little towers. "Full rules, if Arty dies, he dies." I leaned in to study the board, but it looked more like a battlefield blueprint than a game. Tiny wooden fences, goat corrals, goblin ambush markers, a lot of pointy bits. Ella took a deep breath, trying to compose herself. I'm not that good, she mumbled. They usually let me win. Fred didn't respond. Cass just gave a vague shrug. Then, almost imperceptibly, Fred shot me a look across the table. A faint tilt of the head. Cass met my eyes too, just for a second. Both shook their heads. Slow, subtle. No, we don't. Ella didn't notice. She was too busy organizing her herd of tiny goats, setting them in formation with methodical care. No smugness, no showmanship, just quiet, practiced grace. I swallowed. I was going to die. Fred jabbed a finger at the goat-shaped pieces. So, goats want to get in the barn. Goblins want to eat the goats. You're the shepherd or the war chief. Depends on your mood. That's not very helpful, I said. Ella cleared her throat softly, tucking a strand of hair behind one pointed ear. Okay, each player starts with 5 goats and 5 goblins. The board is divided into quadrants: plains, cliffs, forest, and village. The goats move faster on plains. Goblins ambush better in forests. Each piece has a movement rating and a trait. Horns, hoofs, teeth, that sort of thing. There's also terrain modifiers, line of sight mechanics, and, moral rolls. Fred took a long sip of ale. And if your goat makes it to the barn, it wins. Unless it dies first, then the goblin wins. I blinked. So it's a game of tactical misdirection with unpredictable combat resolution, positional constraints, and bluffing mechanics? Ella stared at me. Yes, exactly. Cass raised an eyebrow at me. Gods, he is sharp. I played a lot of strategy games growing up, I muttered, squinting at a goat piece. We started. The first round was kind to me, mostly because Ella was. She moved her goblins cautiously, telegraphing her ambushes just enough that I could dodge them. I still lost a goat to the forest tile trap, but the rest made decent progress. By the third round, I noticed something shift. Her moves got sharper. No more soft tells. No more baiting me into obvious traps. She'd stopped holding back. I adjusted quickly. Every turn felt like a puzzle now, layered, shifting, designed to punish hesitation. I countered one of her advances with a bluff of my own. She raised an eyebrow. Fred stopped drinking. By the third round, Cass had leaned so far forward, his chin nearly touched the board. Okay, wait, when did this get serious? I think around the moment she stopped going easy on him, Fred muttered, narrowing his eyes. Ella's brow was furrowed in concentration now. No more soft smiles or glances my way. She was in it. We traded points, one barn run, one ambush, one brutal skirmish in the cliffs. The board narrowed. 2 goats left, 1 goblin. Ella's and mine both 1 square from victory. She hesitated, then made her final move. I mirrored it. A beat of silence. It's a tie? Ella said, blinking at the board like it had betrayed her. Cass actually dropped his mug onto the rug. He tied you? Fred gave a low whistle and sat back in his chair. God's below, lad. You've got a brain under all that just woke up in a forest nonsense. Ella looked at me, red-eyed and amazed. You really picked it up that fast? I shrugged. I guess I'm a quick study. Cass grinned wickedly. Well, I believe that means the 2 of you are bathing together. Ella made a tiny panic sound and buried her face in her hands. Dad! I raised my hands innocently. She can have the first bath. I insist. I'm still emotionally reeling from that round 5 faint. Ella peeked at me through her fingers, her voice barely above a whisper. Are you sure? Totally. You earned it. She gave me the smallest, most grateful smile, then bolted upstairs with her towel like she was escaping a crime scene. Cass exhaled, shaking his head. Tied her. Do you know how many times I've tried that game and walked away crying? After a minute of talking, Fred had gone to check on Clover, grumbling something about manure and sore knees, which left me and Cass clearing the table. Ella's footsteps creaked faintly upstairs, followed by the distant sound of splashing water. I started gathering the goat and goblin pieces, carefully stacking them into their little wooden box. Cass leaned back, watching me with that ever-present smirk. "You sure you didn't fake the whole amnesia thing just to seduce our girl?" I blinked. Excuse me?" He gestured lazily with a goblin token. "Fred's been trying to teach me that game for years, and I still don't know what morale rolls are." I shrugged. I played a lot of turn-based stuff growing up. There was a pause, then awkwardly, I asked, "So, about Ella being your daughter?" Cass raised an eyebrow. "Hmm?" "Well, first of all, you and Fred are, He smirked. "Not dark elves?" Yeah, let's go with that." "She's adopted," he said, completely unbothered, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. And in hindsight, it probably was. But I didn't know how this world worked. Could pregnancy happen between a same-sex couple? Who knows? "Oh, of course." Cass plucked a goblin token from the rug and gave it an idle spin between his fingers. "Warzone. Years back. Ashfall Rebellion. Fred was on the front lines. Empire thought they could snuff out a few uprisings up north. Dark elf territory. We called it a rebellion. They called it survival." The spin slowed. "He used to love it, you know. War. Thought he was built for it. Never questioned the cause. Just swing, win, drink, and repeat. An absolute monster with an axe. Could cleave solid stone in half. Glory chaser through and through." He set the token down gently. "Then they hit this village. Already burnt to cinders by the time his unit got there. Thought it was empty, just smoke and bones." Cass leaned forward, voice quieter now. "Then he heard crying. Found her in the cellar. Half buried under a collapsed door, skin and bones, covered in soot. Wouldn't even look at him. Just kept whispering something he couldn't understand, over and over. Clutching a doll like it was the only thing left in the world." I swallowed. Fuck. He had tried to report it. Command told him she was a liability. Said we weren't in the business of feeding strays. Cass's eyes flicked to me, sharp and dry. Fred didn't argue. Just picked her up and turned around. He gave a slow shrug. A couple officers reached for their swords. Fred gave him a look, the kind that makes your hand forget how to grip steel. Nobody stopped him. There was a long silence. Walked into the trees and kept walking. Found me a few months later trying to cheat a bandit out of his boots. He smiled faintly, then glanced toward the ceiling. Water sloshed upstairs. A clang. A muffled, "Sorry." Cass chuckled under his breath. And now he spends his days brushing goats, growing carrots, and making sure she doesn't accidentally drown herself. I didn't laugh. I sat there, fingers curled around a goat-shaped game piece, and tried to picture it. Fred, bloodied and roaring, cutting a path through some northern battlefield. Fred walking into a burning village. Fred finding a girl in the dark. And just stopping. Not because someone told him to. Not because it made sense, but because something inside him finally refused to look away. I looked toward the ceiling where the sound of water had stilled. The pipes groaned, a door creaked open. I'd been thinking of Ella as the quiet one, the sweet one, smart, shy. But now all I could think was, she survived that. That fire, that cellar, that silence. And somehow she came out of it knowing how to bluff like a general and smile like nothing ever hurt. Footsteps padded down the stairs. I turned and there she was, hair damp and loose around her shoulders, skin still pink from the heat. She wore a pale nightgown, simple but soft, with a high collar and little embroidered flowers near the hem. Not flashy, not revealing, but the way it clung, the way it caught the light, she looked like something out of a storybook. She held out a folded towel, her cheeks already going red. "It's your turn," she said, eyes flicking somewhere over my shoulder. I took it gently. "Thanks. Was it nice?" She gave a small nod, fingers fidgeting with the hem of her nightgown. "Mm-hmm. It's not fancy, but the water stays warm a long time." There was a bead of quiet. She bit her lip. I didn't take too long, did I? Not at all, I smiled warmly, and she smiled back, just the tiniest bit. Cass leaned back on the couch with a lazy stretch. Right then, Ella, be a darling and show our guest where the bath is. Ella froze mid-step, halfway to the sitting room. Why can't you? Cass let out an exaggerated sigh. Because I'm drunk, obviously. You've had 1 cup. 1 large cup. Also, I'm cozy. Look at me. He gestured vaguely at the blanket draped over his legs like that settled the matter. Ella hesitated, then looked at me, then at the stairs, then back at me. It's all right. I can find it on my own, I offered gently. No, she said quickly, cheeks already going pink. It's fine. I'll just... Come on. She turned and started up the stairs without waiting for a response, clutching the hem of her nightgown like it might fly away. I followed, careful not to step too loudly on the creaking wood. At the top of the landing, she paused by a narrow door and opened it just a crack. There's a hook for the towel, soap's on the shelf, water should still be warm. Her voice was quiet, almost clinical, like she was giving instructions for an inn guest, but her ears were bright red. Thanks, I said, just as quietly. She didn't look at me, just gave a small nod and backed away like I was made of fire. Then she disappeared into her room and closed the door behind her. I stood there for a moment, alone in the hallway, holding a towel that still smelled faintly of lavender and smoke. Then I stepped into the bathroom. The door clicked shut behind me. The room was small but solid, stone walls so precisely fitted you couldn't slip a dagger between them. Dwarven work, maybe? Even the air smelled clean, like hot water and polished rock. I turned toward the small mirror above the basin. The glass was old, a little fogged at the edges, but clear enough. And I stopped. The face staring back at me was familiar, but not entirely. High cheekbones, strong jaw, no scars, no blemishes, hair a little tousled, but the kind that looked better that way. Eyes sharp, symmetrical. It looked like me, but not like I remembered. Is this me? I searched for something, anything to recognize. A freckle, a shadow, a flaw. But it was all a little too clean, a little too composed. Like someone had drawn me from memory and smoothed out the parts that didn't fit. I couldn't remember it ever being in this good of shape. Not soft, not weak, but this? This was an athlete's frame, a soldier's. Not mine. Well, not exactly. The tub sat beneath a narrow window, moonlight spilling in like silver ink. A candle flickered on a shelf nearby, casting gentle shadows across the room. The bath was still full, steam curling off the surface like it had been just waiting for me. I peeled off my clothes, still the same ones I'd woken up in. Plain cotton, leather vest, simple wrappings on my feet. They felt like a starter kit, like something someone had chosen for me, not something I'd chosen for myself. I stepped into the water. Heat climbed my calves, then my spine. I eased in fully, muscles sighing beneath the surface. The tub wasn't big, but it was deep, sturdy, practical. I let my head rest against the rim and closed my eyes. The system. What was it really? They didn't call it magic, didn't call it a curse either, just accepted it. Like gravity, like trees, like pain. A universal constant. And yet, it still felt off. Like a video game UI layered over reality. Too neat, too tidy. Fred, he scared me a little. Not in the way that made you want to run, more like a cliff edge. Solid, unmoving. But if you leaned wrong, you'd break something important. I'd seen that look in his eyes earlier, when Cass told me that story. The kind of man who used to kill for reasons he didn't question until the day he did, and then just stopped. That kind of resolve does not come cheap. Cass. Loud, sharp, quick with a joke and quicker with a grin. He teased like it was breathing, constant, relentless, but there was warmth behind it. Not the kind you had to earn, the kind he just gave freely. He definitely liked me. probably more than I deserved. Ella. No, I stopped the thought before it could form all the way. Not because it was dangerous. Not yet. Just too early. I barely knew her. She was kind, quiet, sharp. And that was enough to keep me curious. I shifted slightly, water sloshing around my shoulders. A few droplets clung to the rim, catching the candlelight like glass. I should have felt safe, clean, grateful. And I did, but something gnawed at me. The forest, the way I woke up. This body that wasn't mine but moved like it belonged. The feeling of being placed, of being inserted into a story already in progress. What am I doing here? No answer came, only the sound of water and the candle flickering beside me. After scrubbing myself, I'd laid back and closed my eyes, resting for the first time today. If only for a minute. I came back down, wrapped in a borrowed blanket, hair still damp, skin humming from the heat. The fire had burned low, but the room still held its warmth. Cass was slumped on the couch, mouth slightly open, an empty cup dangling from one hand. His other arm was thrown dramatically over his eyes, like a swooning noblewoman in a play. Fred didn't even look up. "Lightweight elf," he muttered, more fond than annoyed. "Can't handle his ale like a dwarf, but I still love him." I chuckled and stepped closer to the hearth. Fred gave a small grunt, then pointed toward the corner of the room. "I'll set out a cot for you earlier. It ain't much, but it'll keep your back off the floor. I'll try to scrounge up something better after the next hole, once coin starts flowing again." I looked at it. Simple, sturdy, with a thick wool blanket folded neatly at the foot. "I really can't thank you enough," I said quietly. Fred just grunted, like thanks made him uncomfortable. "Don't thank me yet. Wait till you're holding crates tomorrow." I smiled and moved toward the cot, setting the blanket aside as gently as if it were glass. Fred took another swig of his drink and stared into the fire for a moment more. "After labor," he said, "we'll see about putting a blade in your hands. Sword, axe, club, your call. We'll walk you through the basics." I paused, then said, "Sword, it seems the most, versatile." In reality, I just thought they were the coolest. Fred nodded once, as if that settled it. "Good choice. Not as good as an axe, but still good." Then he stood, gave Cass a half-hearted blanket toss that missed entirely, and disappeared down the hall. I lingered a moment longer, watching the last log crumble into glowing ash. Then I lay down, pulled the blanket up to my shoulders, and let the firelight fade. Tomorrow would come soon enough. Thank you for listening. If you want to read ahead, you can find the link to my book on Royal Road in the video description. If you're enjoying the story, please feel free to leave a comment and tell me your thoughts. If you like my way of storytelling, please subscribe to my channel. I'll be writing and uploading more chapters and stories soon. Thank you so much for listening.